Hello, and welcome to my 5th video blog entry. My name is Teacher Holly, or just Holly, whichever you choose. And this is number 5 in my series of videos for language teachers. Specifically, this blog is for language teachers who teach online. I am an ESL teacher, and so these videos are more or less designed for the ESL context, English as a second language, but these activities can be used to teach any language. So if you are a teacher of a different language than English, you are very welcome to watch and very welcome to share. So let's get started. In this video, I am going to talk about a vocabulary activity that I have used several times. It has evolved a little bit, so I'm going to discuss some of the different iterations that it has gone through, and I'm going to demonstrate at least some of them for you so you can kind of get an idea of how it's done. And of course, if you can think of other ways to use it, please do leave a comment below, leave a comment on Google+, whatever, because the nice thing about a lot of these activities is they can be adapted, they can be switched around, they can, and that, of course, is always better for the students because innovation is good. This activity is actually adapted from a grammar activity that I read about in the book that you will see cited in the description by Maggie Sokolik called 50 Ways to Teach Them Grammar. I'm going to go ahead and plug just because some of you might be interested in these books. The 50 Ways to Teach Them series has lists of helpful activities. A lot of them are designed for the actual classroom context. Many of them can be adapted to the online context, or maybe you teach in both contexts, so these books would be very useful. But let's move on to our actual content, shall we? This activity, I don't really have a good name necessarily for it, but what it is an activity where the student takes his or her name and collects or gathers vocabulary words to use for spelling his or her name. So let's go ahead and do some screen share so I can show you what I mean, because I'm sure that sounds a little confusing. All right, let's see here. I'm just going to show you a blank document that I have open, and you're going to see me adding content to it. Alrighty. So my name is Holly, of course, so I'm going to spell this out at the top in capital letters. Here we go. And let's say, for the sake of learning, that I need to gather some nouns. So I need to find some nouns that spell out the name Holly. Now, first I'm going to show you the ways that you can use this to practice new vocabulary. So if you are practicing parts of speech, you can simply just go with the part of speech, nouns, whatever, nouns, adjectives, adverbs. And you can ask the student to Google. So you can ask the student to, let's see, let me stop sharing my screen. There we go, because I need to share a different screen with you. You can ask the student simply to Google nouns that begin with H. So we're going to go ahead and look at Google. Google. Oops, where's that? There it is. And here we've got Google open. Beautiful Google. And we're going to Google English. Oops. Nouns beginning with H. You may have to help them with this. And so you will see, we'll just go down here. Words starting with H. Nouns that start with H, noun1.com, and we'll just open this website very quickly because I like it. I've used it for this activity a lot. And the students can just choose a word that's new for them that starts with H. And then they go on to O, and then they need to find two of them that start with L, so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and, oops, oops, find that stop button and go back to our document. Here we go. And we'll go to screen share again. Alrighty, so we're back at our document. I will try to do less back and forth, but I find that it does help to see these things. So, for example, let's just pretend that a student chose the name horse. So they would write, oops, good grief. They would write, or you would write, horse in whatever chat client that you chose. And at this point, you could ask the student to make a sentence, or you could just have them gather all of the nouns first and spell out their name. Say their name was Aliena or David or Hamid, something like this. You could have them, spell out their whole name and then make sentences with the new words after you had discussed the meanings. So let's just go with, to complete this, olive, lily, flower, light, and yogurt. No, not yogurt. Yo-yo. I like yo-yos. So then you would discuss these words and you would write sentences. Maybe you would ask the students to look up the meanings or translate depending on the level. There are a lot of different things you could do with this. You could try to use them in different conversations, ask the student conversation questions, which brings us to the next iteration of the activity. I'm going to go ahead and erase everything here, and I'm going to rewrite my name, Holly. There we go. And this time, you ask the student to choose a topic that is interesting for them. For example, let's say sports. That's a pretty popular one. Here we go. We've got sports. And just for the sake of clarity, I'm going to move down a little farther here so you can see more easily where our words start. And you would ask the student again to Google nouns that start with H, but they would be specifically looking for a noun that is sports related if they couldn't think of one already. So let's say I don't know, just for the sake of time, let's just say hat. Hat. Everyone wears caps or hats, right? In sports or no, helmet. Good grief, does helmet have one or two L's? I think it has one. Um, and then they would have, I don't know, um, goodness, what O noun is related to sports? And see, here's where it gets interesting. Here's where this activity gets interesting because students need to think a little more broadly. And at the end, they will begin to see how words are very related or can be used to discuss a topic even though they aren't obvious. And so this broadens knowledge a little bit. So we have uh, organization. An organization, there are a lot of organizations that sponsor sports. So this is where if the student gets stuck, you could suggest this word. This is what I have done. Suggest this word, or if they're showing you the list that they've come up with or telling you about it, then you would say, is organization related to sports, do you think? And then you would have a very short explanation about how, at least in the States, organizations often will sponsor sporting events, sometimes different sporting things, or especially charity sporting events. Some organizations will sponsor, I think some organizations will sponsor a player, you know, things like this. And so actually you're adding a little cultural knowledge because maybe this doesn't happen in their country. So let's see, we have, what else? Related to sports that begins with L, a noun. Oh, goodness. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this video thinking of one. So let's just go down a little bit. Here we go. And if you wanted to, if you had enough class time, depending on students and all of that, you could go to verbs, or if the student needs to work more on adverbs, then you could say, okay, we need to find some sports related adverbs, and they would have to Google English adverbs beginning with H. And so let's say, let's use the word honestly, and here's honestly is a good adverb that begins with H. And so here, of course, you may have to bring up the idea that the H is silent, depending on their pronunciation. So they learn a new fact about pronunciation and reading. You could bring up the fact of, you know, maybe it would spark a little bit of discussion about ethics in sports, things like this, because, for example, the umpire should make calls, or the referee should deal honestly with players, or something like this. And so you have a little discussion about how in the world is the word honestly related to sports. And what this does basically is it reviews a little parts of speech, and it brings other things into it, into the mix. And so they should be high intermediate to advanced to do this. I would say low intermediate, intermediate mid, novice, beginner, however you want to label it. I wouldn't necessarily use this iteration of the activity with them, because even with the high intermediate to low advanced or whatever students that I have used it with, have sometimes had some trouble making the connections when thinking about how a word is related to or used to discuss a topic more abstractly. You know, the more abstract connections that aren't so obvious. So that's that. And what you would do after you had gathered your words like this with your topic is that you would stay on topic and you would take turns with the student asking questions. Once again, in the online venue, you are often the other one in the pair. And so you are very much a participant in this. And so if you needed to do some demo, you would start with the question. So for example, do you think it is wise? Do you think it is wise to wear a helmet when you play sports? Something like this. And you might have a little bit of discussion. And then the student, you would say, okay, the student, it's your turn. And the student would choose from this list of words that you had collected and ask his or her own question or make a statement, something like this, you know. So you have some conversation with the words. Okay, let's erase, and we're going to talk about something else that can be done with the word list. And what that is that the student has to create either a narrative or a little speech using as many of these vocabulary words as possible. And the speech must be related to the topic. So for example, if I were the student, I might say something like this, and maybe the student needs some time to prepare, or maybe you want them to, they're more advanced and you want them to really practice with the fluency element. So you see what they can come up with on the spot. But they might say, let's see, I knew let's just use the slang ref. Uh, no. Okay, I knew a football player, and of course they would probably be talking about soccer, who didn't play honestly. He would try to do anything. Whoops. He could to make a point. I can't write tonight. Point even breaking the rules. And I know this is very native-like, and some students would probably produce this, and some students probably wouldn't. And so this is the point where you could be typing corrections for them, or you could be taking notes and offer them corrections afterward. It's up to you. And he never liked to wear his helmet. Oy. Sorry about that. You know, something like this. And it would go on and try and use as many of the words as they could until either the class ended or they ran out of steam, or both. Okay, so this is one iteration of the activity and one thing you can do with the words that are collected. You can assign this as homework, the word collection as homework. You can, and yes, I did erase my screen. And then in class, you have the conversation. But I find that for some students, this activity is a little bit nebulous as homework, a little bit confusing, ambiguous, any kind of synonym you want to throw in there. So maybe for the first time it should be done in class. It kind of depends because I did assign it to a student or two as homework, and it was interesting because this student found words that I didn't even know were in the English language. So that was really interesting. I learned some new stuff, and she thought it was kind of funny. And I said, you're teaching me. So that was interesting. You could play it that way. It's a little disconnected that way though, because you have to tell the student, oh, we don't really commonly use that, or oh my gosh, I've never heard of that word. And I don't know. She never said anything, but she was probably thinking, well, then why did you have me do it this way? What the heck? So you need to establish a purpose and just say, okay, this is just reviewing parts of speech, or this is just, I had her make sentences with them. So she practiced a little structure. But anyway, so you're not staring at a blank screen any longer. Let's do this one more time. Here we go with my name. And whoops, to stop sharing screen. Let's see. No, there it is, screen share. This is something you can use with the lower levels or as a way to stay a little more on track. Oops, we're gonna go back to our nouns page because we need to be in Google again. So we're back in our nouns that start with H just for now. And what you would do is ask the student to choose a topic. And so let's just stick with sports. And maybe you want to leave it broad like this, or maybe you want to narrow it down. What's your favorite sport? Um, you know, American football, or what's a sport that you would like to learn more about? Something like this. But let's just go with sport. And we're going to Google English vocabulary, and you would be Googling this, or you can ask them to Google it. It's up to you. Vocabulary for sports. I hope it. Ah, there we go. English vocabulary for sports. And if you were Googling, of course, you would give them the page. Here we go. So we have this page here. I'll give you some vocabulary. And the idea would be you could specify nouns or verbs, or you could just say, okay, try to find vocabulary words from this list that will spell your name. And maybe they would choose a couple of nouns, a couple of verbs. So let's see here. What have we got? Pardon me while I use my screen reader to find. Here we go. So we've got names for sports. Horse racing. So here's an H word. And you see this page has links they can click on. I'm an English teacher who struggles with... That's 2 words. Okay, I was just confirming that it's 2 words because I am an English teacher who struggles with spelling. And you can't see it, but I'm writing horse racing in my list here because it starts with H. And the student would go from there. So you could find an O word, blah, blah, blah. And let's go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Hello. Now you can see me, hopefully. And that's basically it, because there are 2 ways you could go from here. So you would discuss the new vocabulary. You could say, okay, choose vocabulary that you know, or you can specify that they must be new words, that the student has to choose new words. It's up to you. Really, this video would be too long if I discussed everything that should go into that could go into this activity. But basically, you could do the 2 end iterations. You could ask the student to prepare a little speech or narrative, or you could have yourselves a bit of a conversation. You could assign the narrative as homework for a writing activity. That's another thing you could do. So those are some of the ways that this activity can be used. These are the main ways that I have used it. And once again, if you think of another way to use it, please do share in the comments below. Also, please feel free to share this video on Facebook, Twitter, or the social network of your choice. I hope you have enjoyed this activity and that it has provided you another idea in your toolbox for your online language classroom. And this is Teacher Holly saying thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.